welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Right now we are joined by four-star General Michael Hayden. He served as the Director of National Security Agency and the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. General Hayden is also a member of the Lignet.com Advisory Board, an affiliate site here at Newsmax. General Hayden, as always, great talking with you.
Oh, thanks very much for the opportunity. Good morning.
All right, so it's clear this morning that Governor Romney did in fact pass that so-called commander-in-chief test during the last presidential debate. But after all the intensity and the remaining questions about what happened in Benghazi and Libya, were you surprised not to see Libya play a bigger role in the debate last night?
Yeah, frankly, I was, but also upon reflection, I understand perhaps why it didn't. I think Governor Romney's goal was to portray himself, and he did, as responsible, knowledgeable, and calm. And I think the president spent a great deal of time trying to provoke the governor, trying to make him appear to be dangerous or scary, and he failed. So I think I understand why the governor didn't want to get down into the tactical weeds, but to keep himself and his thoughts at the strategic level and looking forward.
And as you mentioned, that will continue to play out in the media as well. Another big standout, at least for me last night, was Romney's frequent mention of peace. And that quote that really stood out particularly was, "We can't kill our way out of this mess." Some of the pundits say this was a deliberate attempt by Romney and his campaign to distance himself from the neocon ideology. What was your take?
Well, I wouldn't know about that, but the "can't kill our way out of this" actually echoes, and I had not shared this with the governor, but that thought is very close to an event I had while I was President Obama's CIA chief for the first 3 weeks of his administration. We had just had an operational success, and I had briefed it at a National Security Council meeting, and after the meeting, Rahm Emanuel, then Chief of Staff, came over and kind of poked me in the shoulder and said, "Hey, that's a good job, Hayden. Thank you." And I responded to him, because I was not going to have much more chance to talk to the administration, that, "Rahm, thank you. That was a counterterrorism success. But unless you're prepared to do this forever, you have to change the facts on the ground. And that's going to require a completely different kind of effort."
And now, when asked about the biggest national security threat, both men had different answers. From the president, it was a terrorist attack from some type of terrorist organization. From Governor Romney, it was a nuclear-armed Iran. Who gave the better answer to that question last night?
Well, I'm advising to the campaign, but I did not advise the governor on this question. But I can tell you, I've been giving speeches now for 3.5 years since I had left government. The general theme of the speech has been, what things keep you awake at night? And for 3.5 years, I have begun with Iran and a nuclear Iran, and pointed out, of all the things I left when I left government, the one that has got increasingly dark, increasingly problematic, has been Iran. And so the governor's choice was the one I have been saying now since I left government, and I frankly think it is the most destabilizing trend out there should it come to fruition and the Iranians get a nuclear capability.
Let's focus on Iran a little bit more. The New York Times, of course, recently reported that the U.S. may soon begin talks with Iran to slow down or stop its nuclear program. The president last night during the debate said the report was not true. First, would these talks even be possible? And second, do you believe perhaps this was a story that the administration may have leaked to get this kind of news coverage ahead of the debate to play in their favor?
Well, if I recall, the source of the story in the Times was in the United States, not in Iran, and that's if memory serves. So that makes it a bit curious. I generally, when I talk to public audiences, say that this is like one of those little whiteboards where you put two Venn circles on it, and one Venn circle I label what the Iranians are willing to give, and the other Venn circle I usually label what we in the West are willing to accept. And I point out that I have great difficulty finding circumstances in which those two Venn circles overlap. And so, I wouldn't throw the opportunity to negotiate away, but I also wouldn't use negotiations for an endpoint. I would continue the tough sanctions and even increase that and Iran's diplomatic isolation. But frankly, I'm not very hopeful that we're going to get to where we need to be with Iran. I was struck yesterday that Schieffer actually asked, "What does the deal look like?" And the president did not answer that.
No, he did not answer that. And in terms of what you just talked about, in terms of strengthening these sanctions, we heard that from several times that Governor Romney would attempt to do something like that, and also citing the fact that Iran is now 4 years closer to a nuclear weapon. What do you think the largest contributing factor to Iran's progress on its nuclear program has been over the last 4 years?
Well, frankly, we didn't leave coming out of the Bush administration nearly 4 years ago. We didn't leave an easy solution set for the incoming Obama team. This has been the devil's own problem for 3 successive administrations. But what I think the governor was pointing out, and I know Congressman Ryan pointed out in his debate with the vice president, granted, the sanctions are hard. Granted, the isolation of Iran is greater. But granted, they have more centrifuges spinning now than they ever had, and they have been able to produce 4 years' worth of fissile material while we're lining all these things up. One thing that struck me in the debate last night, a thought I believe should have been mentioned, is that the goal is not to punish Iran. The goal is to make Iran change its mind. And if you understand that to be your goal, you're no closer to that than you were a week, a month, a year, or 4 years ago. Yeah, they're suffering, but they haven't changed their mind. And that's the only relevant measure.
And that's the message that has to get to the Iranian people and not just to the American people. So a tough sell there. Again, on those sanctions, Governor Romney mentioned he would go further. We know the president has exempted some countries from those sanctions. Do you think Governor Romney would pull those exemptions if he were to win?
Again, I'm not in a position to predict the governor's actions, but I do think any prudent look at the sanctions regime would call you to review all the exemptions that you're currently allowing. Look, if the objective here, and it's stated by the president yesterday, we have international unity and we are punishing Iran. Well, every time you offer an exemption, that's not quite punishing Iran, and it's certainly not a reflection of international unity. So I would expect the governor to look long and hard at each of these. Again, back to the earlier point, they haven't changed their mind yet, and so we need to continue to ratchet up. And frankly, a point that wasn't mentioned last night was that the severity of these sanctions is in at least some measure, the product of not of the executive branch, not of the president, but of the Congress that has really held the president's feet to the fire with regard to some of the sanctions.
Yes, and we have heard that from members of Congress. And in terms of Israel, of course, this is a very important theme of last night's debate as well. We heard the president mention Israel first, second, third, and then the fourth mention of Israel came from Bob Schieffer asking Governor Romney. This was a very important part of the debate last night. President Obama has faced some criticism for his relationship with Israel. Did Governor Romney hammer home that point that he would be better for the people of Israel and for U.S.-Israeli relations during the debate last night?
Well, look, I think the governor's returned to that theme throughout the campaign, and how much he did or did not say last night, I don't think changed the center line of the view that he personally, and I need to underscore that word personally, views the relationship with Israel to be very important, and that he personally would tend to the health of the relationship. Look, the president made some good points about the strength of the military and security and intelligence cooperation, and that's all really, really quite good. But I think what the governor was suggesting here, that he was going to tend to this account not on the wholesale level with kind of broad speeches and comments, but on the retail level, establishing the kind of personal relationships with the Israeli leadership that actually strengthens our hand in the relationship in terms of making sure we're doing things that are mutually beneficial rather than running at cross purposes.
And I just want to wrap it up here with get your thoughts on the overall tone of the debate last night. You and I both know that Governor Romney was starting from behind in this debate in particular because he is not the current commander-in-chief. We heard about the fact from Governor Romney that the number of U.S. Navy warships is in decline. The president brought up the fact that the military also has fewer horses and bayonets than it once had. The president also gave an elementary explanation of what aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines do. Do you think that the president's overall tone towards Governor Romney was condescending, and that may have turned off some voters?
Well, this judgment may sound a little stark, but those kinds of comments, and frankly, there were quite a few of those last night. You had two men on stage. One was president, and the other was presidential. I frankly don't think those kinds of comments play well to the general American voting public when a president seems to be so much on the attack and frankly personalizing the attack. Recall that, as you said, the submarines and aircraft carrier, as if you were talking to a child, the investment in the Chinese oil company, the shipping of jobs overseas. But I think the governor's response was really quite solid. He didn't get down into the weeds and into the mud and wrestle on those issues. He simply responded, which I actually wrote down as the best line of the night. Attacking me is not an agenda. And I think most Americans will see that the governor was and appeared to be responsible, knowledgeable, and calm. And if you'd have asked me, what did he have to show going into that debate, that's what I would have answered.
And certainly no question, as we talked about at the very beginning, he did pass that so-called commander-in-chief test. It was a substantive debate. It was good to hear some of these issues get out there on the table, and now they'll battle it out on the stump from here on out until Election Day. General Michael Hayden, as always, it's been great talking with you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.